David had always been an unremarkable figure in the office. He wasn't particularly tall, nor did he have any striking physical features that would make him stand out in a crowd. He was a quiet man, the type of person who preferred to sit in the background and observe rather than draw attention to himself. As a personal assistant to Rachel, the company's CEO, he often found himself surrounded by confident, outgoing personalities, each of them far more captivating than he could ever be. At first glance, Rachel seemed like the epitome of success. She had it all: beauty, power, and a mind that could cut through business problems with the precision of a razor. Her presence commanded attention wherever she went. The office buzzed with whispers about her charisma, her achievements, and the mysterious aura she seemed to carry. And David? He was just the one who kept things running smoothly, making sure Rachel's calendar was filled and her files were organized. He had always admired Rachel from afar, watching her glide through the hallways with an air of confidence that seemed unreachable. She was everything David wasn't: outgoing, assertive, and effortlessly in control of her life. But despite their vast differences, David couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to be in her shoes, to feel that sense of power, to have that kind of confidence. One late evening, after an exhausting day full of meetings and phone calls, Rachel invited David for a drink. It was unexpected. She rarely socialized with her subordinates. David hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to expect, but ultimately agreed. It seemed like an opportunity he couldn't pass up. The idea of spending time with Rachel outside the office in a more relaxed setting filled him with a mix of excitement and anxiety. What did she want from him? Did she see something in him that no one else did? Or was this just another casual conversation? The bar they chose was quiet, with soft lighting and smooth jazz playing in the background. Rachel sat across from David, her eyes gleaming with an intensity that David couldn't quite place. She ordered a glass of wine for herself and a gin and tonic for him. Though David rarely drank, he felt out of place in the upscale setting, but Rachel seemed perfectly at home. Her confidence radiated from her like a warm glow. "So, David," she began, leaning back in her chair, "how do you feel about your position here? Do you think you're getting the recognition you deserve?" David blinked, taken aback by the question. He had never thought much about recognition. He was content doing his job in the background, avoiding the spotlight. But Rachel's question lingered in his mind. Did he deserve more? Was he just a cog in the machine, or could he be something more? "I am just doing my job," David replied nervously, sipping his drink. "I don't really need recognition. I just like helping the company run smoothly." Rachel chuckled softly, a glint of amusement in her eyes. "I admire your humility, David, but sometimes you need to step out of the shadows and make a name for yourself. You have potential. Don't you want to be more than just the guy who organizes my meetings?" David felt his heart race at her words. He had never considered the idea of stepping into the spotlight. He had always been content with the role he played. But something about Rachel's words made him question everything. Did he really want to stay in the background forever? Rachel studied him for a moment, her gaze intense. "I see it in you, David. You have something special, but you're not fully embracing it. You're hiding behind that bland exterior. Don't you want to be confident to make people notice you?" David felt a rush of warmth flood his cheeks. Was she flirting with him, or was this just Rachel's way of motivating him? Either way, he found himself caught in her web, her words digging into his thoughts. He had always wanted to be someone else, someone more confident, someone who didn't shy away from attention. But could he really change? Could he become the person Rachel believed he could be? "Maybe you're right," David said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe I need to change something about myself." Rachel smiled, her eyes glimmering with approval. "Good. Change is necessary for growth, David, and I can help you with that." Little did David know, this casual conversation was about to set into motion a transformation that would alter the course of his life forever. The following days would challenge him in ways he could never have imagined. As Rachel's offer to help him change his appearance and his life took shape, David would soon find himself standing on the precipice of something entirely new, unsure of what was real and what was just part of the game. David's life began to take an unexpected turn in the days following that drink with Rachel. At first, he wasn't sure what to make of her words or how seriously he should take them. But there was something about the way she spoke, so confidently, so assuredly, that stuck with him. It gnawed at him slowly, chipping away at his sense of self, making him question everything he had known about himself. Could he really be more than what he was? Could he truly embrace a new version of himself? Rachel had given him a simple task: to start taking better care of his appearance. She hadn't mentioned anything drastic, but there was an underlying challenge in her words. You have to stand out, David. People should notice you, not just for the work you do, but for who you are, she had said. You're capable of so much more. At first, David balked at the thought. He had never been one to care much about his appearance. He kept his hair short and neat, dressed in the plainest suits he could find, and avoided any kind of attention. But something about Rachel's challenge lingered in his mind, constantly buzzing in the back of his thoughts. The next day, he stood in front of his bathroom mirror, staring at his reflection. His face was unremarkable, a featureless canvas that only revealed the man he had always been, a quiet, unassuming assistant who stayed in the background. But now, for the first time in years, David saw something different. He saw potential. He saw an opportunity to break free from the mundane life he had been living. He started with his hair. It was a simple enough step, a trim maybe, even a change of style. He went to the barber shop, unsure of what he was even asking for. When the barber finished, David could hardly recognize the man in the mirror. His hair was now styled with purpose, sharp and clean-cut, a drastic change from the dull, uniform look he had always sported. He felt a little strange, but at the same time something within him stirred, a strange, unfamiliar feeling of excitement. Over the next few days, David's transformation continued in subtle yet significant ways. He upgraded his wardrobe, ditching the plain suits for more modern, fashionable clothing. His old shoes, scuffed and faded, were replaced with sleek, polished ones. Every morning, he spent a little more time on his appearance, carefully choosing an outfit that made him feel more confident. And each time he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. But even though he was outwardly changing, something within him felt disconnected. The person he was becoming didn't quite match the person he had been. Then came the makeup. Rachel had been clear about one thing: if David was going to fully embrace this transformation, he had to take it to the next level. A little makeup never hurt anyone, she had suggested casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. David hesitated. He had never worn makeup before, had never even considered it. The idea seemed foreign, almost absurd. But Rachel's words echoed in his mind. You have potential. And so, despite his reservations, he found himself standing in a department store, staring at the array of makeup products laid out before him. His hands were shaky as he picked up the foundation, the eyeliner, the lipstick. For a moment, he felt ridiculous, but then a strange sense of anticipation crept in. Could this really work? Could makeup be the key to unlocking the confidence Rachel had promised? That evening, in the privacy of his apartment, David decided to give it a try. He opened the makeup kit and studied the instructions carefully. The foundation went on first, smoothing over his face, hiding the imperfections that had always made him feel self-conscious. Next came the eyeliner, something he never thought he'd be able to master. His hands trembled slightly as he applied it, but to his surprise the lines were sharp and clean. Finally, the lipstick. It felt strange on his lips, a subtle but undeniable change that made him feel different, almost alive. As he looked at himself in the mirror, David was struck by the reflection staring back at him. The person in the mirror wasn't the quiet, reserved assistant he had been just a few weeks ago. This person was someone new, someone bold, someone confident. He didn't know how to explain it, but the makeup had transformed him in a way he never thought possible. For the first time in his life, he saw someone he could be proud of. But there was still something unsettling about it. The transformation was thrilling, yes, but it also made him feel vulnerable. He was putting on a facade, becoming someone he wasn't, and part of him wondered if he was losing himself in the process. Yet at the same time, there was a strange power in it, an exhilarating sense of control over his appearance, over how others would perceive him. And that's when he realized this wasn't just about his looks. It was about who he could become. Days passed, and David began to wear makeup more often, each time perfecting his technique. He walked through the office with a newfound sense of confidence, his steps more purposeful, his posture straighter. He could feel the eyes of his coworkers on him, but for the first time it didn't make him nervous. Instead, he felt powerful. He felt like he was in control of how people saw him, how they perceived him. But there was one thing that David didn't anticipate: Rachel's reaction. The next time they met, Rachel's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer than usual. A slow smile spread across her face, and she raised an eyebrow. Well, she said, her voice full of approval. Look at you, David. I can see the transformation already. You look incredible. David felt a rush of pride at her words. For the first time, someone saw him not just for his work, but for who he had become. Rachel had always been the one in control, the one everyone admired, but now it felt like he was standing beside her in equal measure. As Rachel complimented him, a wave of both excitement and anxiety flooded over him. He was playing a dangerous game, one where the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. Would he be able to maintain this new version of himself, or would the pressure eventually break him? And most importantly, what did Rachel want from him? David had always believed that appearances were fleeting, that the surface-level changes didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But as the days wore on, he began to feel the weight of his transformation pressing down on him, both physically and emotionally. The makeup, the clothes, the constant attention, it was all exhilarating, but it was also exhausting. And Rachel, the woman who had pushed him to embrace this new version of himself, was becoming more than just a mentor. She was a constant presence, watching him, guiding him, but also subtly demanding more. It wasn't long before Rachel started to make him a more direct part of her world. She invited him to her parties, where people like her, powerful, successful, and effortlessly confident, mingled. David, now fully embracing his new appearance, was a hit. The compliments rolled in. The admiration was palpable. But there was an unease building within him. What was Rachel's true intention? Was this just about making him more presentable, or was there something deeper going on? That evening at one of Rachel's high-profile parties, the tension reached its peak. David had spent the past few hours mingling, trying to keep up with a sophisticated crowd. The makeup on his face felt like a second skin. The clothes he wore clung to his body in a way that felt strange yet empowering. But amidst all the admiration, David couldn't shake the feeling that he was playing a role, one that wasn't entirely his own. The line between David the real person and the person Rachel had created was becoming increasingly blurred. Rachel approached him as he stood by the balcony, looking out over the city lights. "You've come a long way, haven't you?" she asked, her voice low and smooth. David turned to face her. "I don't know anymore. Sometimes it feels like I'm losing myself in all of this." Rachel's smile was both reassuring and unnerving. "That's the point, David. You have to lose yourself to become someone better, someone stronger, someone who stands out." David's heart raced as he tried to make sense of her words. "But what do you want from me, Rachel?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Rachel stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his. "I want you to understand your power, David. You've always had it. You just didn't know how to use it. This transformation is just the beginning." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, and David could feel a knot tightening in his stomach. Was this about personal growth, or was it something more? The way Rachel was speaking to him with such intensity, it was as if she saw him as a project, an experiment. And the more he thought about it, the more he wondered if he was just another piece in Rachel's grand design. Before he could say anything else, the door to the balcony opened behind him, and a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Rachel, there you are." It was Emma, Rachel's best friend and business partner. She was the complete opposite of Rachel. Outgoing, charismatic, and never afraid to speak her mind. Emma had always been kind to David, but there was something in her gaze tonight that made him uneasy. As she stepped onto the balcony, she eyed David up and down, her gaze lingering on the makeup and clothes he was wearing. You look different, Emma said, her tone a mixture of curiosity and amusement. David's stomach churned. He was used to compliments, but there was something in Emma's eyes that felt like judgment. Just trying something new, he replied, forcing a smile. Emma raised an eyebrow. I see. And how do you feel, David? Do you feel empowered? David wasn't sure how to respond. The truth was he didn't feel empowered at all. He felt vulnerable, exposed, as if everyone around him could see through the facade he had built. The makeup, the clothes, they were just tools, just a way to cover up the fear and uncertainty that had been growing inside him since he first started this transformation. Rachel, sensing the tension, stepped forward and placed a hand on David's shoulder. He's learning, Emma, she said, her voice smooth and reassuring. We're all learning. Emma's gaze softened, but there was still a hint of skepticism in her eyes. Well, I hope you're not losing yourself in the process, David. It's easy to get lost in the image you create, but the real you is what matters. David's heart skipped a beat. Was Emma warning him? Was she seeing through the mask he had put on? And if she was, what did that mean for the person he had become? As the night wore on, the party began to wind down. David couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He had come so far, and yet he felt like he was on the verge of losing everything. The persona he had created, the confidence he had built, all felt fragile, like a house of cards waiting to collapse. Rachel seemed to sense his unease and pulled him aside before he could slip away into the crowd. David, you're doing great, she said, her voice low. But you need to understand something. This transformation, it's not just about the way you look. It's about who you become. And sometimes that means making difficult choices. David frowned. What do you mean? Rachel leaned in, her face inches from his. You have to decide, David. Are you willing to fully embrace this new identity, or are you going to let fear hold you back? Because the only way forward is to let go of everything you thought you knew about yourself. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. Was she offering him freedom, or was she pushing him further into a trap? David couldn't tell, but one thing was certain. He had never felt more conflicted in his life. As Rachel pulled away, she gave him one last knowing smile. I'll be watching, David. I'll be watching closely. He stood there, the weight of her words pressing down on him. The night had been a turning point, a moment where everything he had worked for felt both empowering and terrifying. He wasn't sure what to do next, but he knew that the path ahead was uncertain. David couldn't shake the feeling that something was off as Rachel's words echoed in his mind. The uncertainty grew stronger. The makeup, the clothes, the way he carried himself, everything had changed. But deep inside, a part of him was afraid that this transformation wasn't about empowerment at all, but about control. The party had ended hours ago, and Rachel's house was quiet, the distant hum of the city barely audible in the background. David found himself standing in front of the full-length mirror in Rachel's guest room, staring at his reflection. The woman he saw staring back at him seemed foreign yet oddly familiar. The makeup was flawless, the dress elegant and form-fitting, the heels high and confident. But underneath it all, David saw the man he used to be struggling to break free. His fingers traced the edge of his makeup with a soft but steady pressure as he stared into his own eyes. Who was he becoming? He didn't know anymore. Rachel's influence was undeniable. She had been the one to guide him through this transformation, but was it truly for his benefit, or had he become another pawn in her game? A soft knock at the door snapped him out of his thoughts. His heart skipped a beat. It was Rachel, of course. It had to be. She had been watching him all night, studying his every move, trying to push him further into the role she had created for him. David. Rachel's voice was soft, but there was a firmness behind it. Can I come in? He hesitated, his breath caught in his throat. What was she going to say? What was she going to do? David didn't know, but he had a sinking feeling that whatever happened next, it would change everything. Sure, he replied, trying to steady his nerves. Come in. The door opened and Rachel stepped inside. Her eyes immediately found David in front of the mirror. She didn't say anything at first. She just watched him. Her gaze was almost predatory, as if she were waiting for something. David could feel his heart pounding in his chest, the anxiety swirling inside him. What did she want from him? "You're perfect," Rachel said after a long pause, her voice low and approving. David's eyes flickered toward her, but he didn't say anything. He wasn't sure how to respond. He didn't feel perfect. He felt hollow. "You've come a long way, David," Rachel continued, walking closer. "You've embraced the new you, and that's something many people can't do. But now it's time for the next step." David turned to face her, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean? What's the next step?" Rachel smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "The next step is embracing your power fully. You're not just playing a role anymore, David. This is who you are, and it's time to let the world see that." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. David felt a chill run down his spine. It was like she was drawing him deeper into something he wasn't sure he wanted, something he wasn't sure he could handle. "Rachel, I don't know if I can do this," David said, his voice trembling slightly. "I don't know if I'm ready." Rachel's expression softened, but only slightly. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. Her touch was both comforting and possessive. "You don't have to be ready, David. You just have to trust me. Trust that I know what's best for you." David's mind raced. He wanted to pull away, to take control of his own life again, but the pull of Rachel's influence was strong. It was like she had woven herself into the very fabric of his existence, and the more he fought against it, the more he felt like he was drowning. As Rachel continued to speak, her voice was hypnotic, her words blending with the beating of David's heart. "The world is going to see you for who you truly are. You'll be unstoppable. You'll have the confidence you've always wanted, and I'll be right there beside you, guiding you every step of the way." David's thoughts swirled in a haze. It was all too much. He had started this journey to find himself, to become something better, but now it felt like he was losing himself completely. And then, just as the weight of her words threatened to overwhelm him, Rachel's phone buzzed on the table nearby. She looked down at it, her expression flickering for a moment before she picked it up. David's heart stopped as he caught a glimpse of the screen. It was a message from Emma. Rachel's eyes widened as she read the message, and David could see the shift in her demeanor. The calm, confident facade she had maintained suddenly cracked, just for a moment, and he saw something darker lurking beneath it. The message was brief, but the tone was sharp. "We need to talk. I don't trust him anymore." David's breath caught in his throat. Was Emma onto him? Had she figured it all out? Was she going to expose everything? Rachel looked up from the phone, her face unreadable. She didn't speak at first, but the silence was deafening. David's pulse raced as he waited for her to say something. His entire world felt like it was crumbling around him. The transformation, the compliments, the attention, it had all felt so empowering, so thrilling. But now, in this moment, it felt like it was all about to unravel. Rachel finally spoke, her voice low and calm, though there was a coldness to it that David had never heard before. "Don't worry about Emma," she said, her words cutting through the tension like a knife. "We'll handle it. But you need to decide, David. Are you going to take the next step with me, or are you going to let this all fall apart?" David's mind raced, the weight of her words sinking in. The stakes had never been higher. His heart was torn in two. Part of him wanted to run, to escape this whirlwind of transformation and manipulation. But another part of him, the part that had embraced the changes, the part that had finally felt seen, was terrified of losing everything. As Rachel stepped closer, her fingers brushing lightly against his cheek, David felt the pull of her once again. But in that moment, a cold realization hit him. He was no longer in control of his own destiny. The screen of Rachel's phone flashed again. Emma's name was still there, the message waiting. David had a choice to make, a choice that would change everything. And as the tension mounted, the future hung in the balance.